In this tutorial, we are going to take a look at how to add Steam multiplayer in Unreal Engine 5. Before we get started and jump into the engine, you have to download a couple of things. And the first thing you have to download, if you search on Google, .NET Core, and you click on the first link from Microsoft, because we need it for the project in Unreal Engine. So go ahead and click on the latest one that you see on your screen. You might see this in the future. And the next thing you want to download is the .NET Framework. And if you again click on the first link from Microsoft and you install the latest framework that you see on your screen, and then the next thing you want to download is DirectX. And again, Microsoft's website, the first one. Here you select the language and hit download. And the final thing you have to download is Visual Studio 2022. So go ahead and select the first one. And here, when you hit download, you have to download the Community 2022. Now, when you install Visual Studio, it is important that you install the correct things during the installer. So here I have my own Visual Studio, and I'm going to click on modify so you can see what I have installed for my Visual Studio. And you have to select the .NET Desktop Development, and you have to select the Universal Windows Platform Development and the desktop development with C++, and also the mobile development with C++. And down here, you have to select the game development with C++. And I also have this, I don't think it's needed, but selecting the Linux and embedded development with C++ as well. Now over here in the individual components, you have to click here and then you have to scroll all the way down where you see on your screen the Windows SDK. Just make sure that you are installing Windows 10 SDK as well as Windows 11 SDK. Now you can install my version here as you see it on the screen if it is clear for you. But go ahead and install Windows 10 SDK as well as Windows 11 SDK and just go ahead and hit install and wait for it to finish. Now I'm just going to close everything down and I'm going to jump into the engine. If you're interested in Unreal Engine 5 game development courses, you can visit my website gameinstruct.com. Here I make both single player and multiplayer courses with videos being released daily in 4K resolution. There's also a section for purchasing game ready assets and another tab for hiring me for private tutoring sessions. I'm available 24/7 on my Discord server to help you out, and all of the links are in the description below. Go ahead and launch the engine, or you can launch a project that you're already working on. Now, for this tutorial, I'm just going to create a new project. So I'm going to launch the engine. And when I launch the engine, I'm just going to create a new project. So selecting games, just simply selecting the third person project here template and choose a location to save it and then give it a name. For example, for this one, I'm just going to call it Steam Sessions. And before I hit create, I'm just going to take this one, starter content enabled. So I have something to work with and I'm going to hit create. And here we are inside of the engine. And if I click on play, you can see I am in the game and everything is working. And also if I click up here and I select of players is 2. So remember you can click up here to select 2 player. And also over here as the net mode, you have to select play as listen server. So selecting that as well. And I'm going to click up here and play it in a new editor window. So now if I do that, it pops up on my second screen. But as you can see, it is working as multiplayer. However, this is only inside of the engine. The purpose for this tutorial is to take it to Steam so we can actually connect with each other. We have a server browser, we can host games, and so on. I'm just going to close all of this for now. And before we can add Steam multiplayer to it, we have to convert this project to a C++ project. Now, we are not working with C++, we're only going to work with blueprints, but we have to convert it into a C++ project before the files from the Steam plugin can work. So to do this, go ahead and hit Tools and click on New C++ class. Just go ahead and click on Next, hit Create Class, and it's going to create a new C++ class. And it's also going to convert your project into a C++ project. So now you can see it says project now includes source and so on. So I'm going to close this, and it says, would you like to edit the code now? I'm just going to hit no. And now it is a C++ project. So what we can do now is we can close this down. And now it is time to add the Steam plugin. Now, if you just Google Recency Steam, this is the Steam plugin that is working currently in Unreal Engine 5.3 and probably also the future versions, depending on when you're seeing this tutorial. So just go ahead and search for Recency Steam and go ahead and click on the first link, Recency Steam on GitHub. So clicking on that one. And inside of here, you can also write the link if you wish. I'm going to include this in the description below. So go ahead and get in here, click on code, and click on download zip file. And it's going to download the plugin for you. And when you have downloaded the file, go ahead and click in here, go to the downloads folder, and open up the newly downloaded file. Inside of here, I'm just going to go in here and clicking on the plugins folder. And inside of the plugins folder, you see the advanced sessions plugin. Go ahead and click on that file. And these are the two folders that we need, the advanced sessions and advanced Steam sessions. What I want you to do now is I want you to find your project that you are working with currently. Now, this here is my newly created project in Unreal Engine, and usually they are in Documents, Unreal Projects. And this is the Steam Sessions project I just created. But remember, if you're using your own project, go to your own project's file and go inside of here. And let us now make a new folder called plugins. So let me right click here, make a new folder called plugins. Double click here and now drag the first one into here and also drag the second one inside of here. So now you have both folders, the advanced sessions and advanced team sessions inside of the plugins folder. So what I want you to do now is I want you to delete some of the folders here. So delete the .vs folder and derived data cache folder, the intermediate folder, the saved folder, and the vsconfig and steam sessions.sln. So not this one, but this one. Go ahead and hit delete on your keyboard. So these are the folders we have left. Now right click on your Unreal Engine project file, go to show more, and here go ahead and generate Visual Studio project files. Go ahead and click that. And the reason why we needed to download the first things from the beginning, the .NET Core, .NET Framework, and so on, this is because we need to do this. We need to generate Visual Studio project files. So go ahead and do that. Sometimes you get errors if this is the first time you do it. Please read the error here on the screen if you get one and try to see what it needs. Sometimes it is a specific file that you're missing on your PC and so on. So go ahead and do that. And you can also write in the comments below if you need me to help you out as well. Here you see an SLN file has been generated. Go ahead and double click this file. And when Visual Studio opens up, go ahead and click on this arrow beside the games folder so you can see your game name here. Steam Sessions is my game. Right click this one and hit build. So when you do that, you can see it starts building down here. And I'm just going to wait for it to finish. Sometimes it takes 10 seconds, sometimes it takes 5 minutes. So I'm just going to skip ahead until this one is finished. All right, so now it finished the build and it says that it succeeded and 0 failed. So very important to take a look at this message down here to see that you don't have any errors. And when this is finished, let's close down Visual Studio because now we can go into the project and test if we actually have Steam. So go ahead and double click on your Unreal Engine project. And now inside of here, let's go to Edit and go to Plugins. Now inside of Plugins, let's check if we have the plugin. So if you click on the Advanced Sessions plugin here that we installed, you can see they are both enabled. Also, if you scroll down and you find this one called Online Platform, make sure that the online subsystem is also enabled. Very important. Let's close now this plugins tab. So now that we have ensured that the plugins are enabled, I want you to go to Google and search for Online Subsystem Steam. And inside of here in Unreal Engine's documentation, this one, Online Subsystem Steam, you have to go inside of here. I will also post this in the description down below, but just make sure that this is updated. So down here, if you scroll down, you see this one, finished settings for the default engine.ini. Go ahead and copy all of this here. You don't really have to understand what this means unless you want to improve this plugin. So just right click, copy. Now let's go back to the folder for the Unreal Engine project. And this is the Steam sessions that I'm working on. And inside of here, I want you to go to config and open up the default engine.ini and paste this newly copied code. If you are working with a game, if you already have a game on Steam, you have to change this Steam development ID. So you have to change it to your own ID. However, right now we can test without uploading anything to Steam. So we can just use this test ID, which Steam has created for us. So go ahead and hit save for this file. And now I want you to close your Steam Sessions project if you have it open, and then open it once again. Now inside of here, just click on these three dots and just make sure you are running the game through a standalone game. Now make sure that you have Steam open, because if you don't have Steam open on your computer, your Steam plugin is not going to work. So every time you want to work with Steam Sessions, you have to have Steam open and you have to be logged into your account. We'll go ahead and click on standalone game, and let's play the game and see if the plugin is working. So if it is working, it should pop up with Steam, and you can see it popped up on my second monitor. But you can see down here to the right below that Steam is running and the plugin is working. So now we are ready to work with the plugin. All right, so let's start doing the main menu first. So let's do that here in the content drawer. I'm going to click down here and dock in layout so you can better see this up all the time. And I'm also going to hit window and going to hit the debug, if I can find it here in the tools, debug, widget reflector. And I'm going to set the UI to 1.25 because I'm recording on a 4K monitor and the UI is small for you. So now it is a larger size. Now inside of here, what I want you to do is I want you to create a new map because we need to make the main menu now. So here in the content, I'm actually going to make a new folder called dash my content so I can see this up all the time. So inside of here, let's right click, make a new folder called maps. And in here, let's make a new level called map main menu. Inside of here, let's double click, open up the new level that we created, and let's save it. And now inside of here, let's make this main menu map the main map that opens when you open up your game. So let's click on edit, go to project settings, and inside of maps and modes, here you can change the editor startup map to be your main menu map that you just created. And also the same thing for the game default map. We want to start the player in the main menu. Next, we want a player controller and a game mode for the main menu. So let's get out of the maps folder. Let's make a new folder called blueprints. And inside of here, let's right click, make a new blueprint class, and let's make the game mode and call it GM. I usually call it GM as a prefix, and let's call it main menu. Let's right click again, make a new blueprint class, make a player controller, and call it PC main menu. So player controller main menu. Now open up the game mode, and inside of the game mode, let's find here in the class defaults the player controller class, and let's change this one from the default Unreal Engine to this one, the player controller we just created called PC main menu. Go ahead and compile, save everything, file, save all. Let's close it down. And also here in the world settings, now if you don't have the world settings open, you can click on window and select world settings. And inside of here, for the game mode override, you have to select your own game mode that you just created, the GM main menu. So go ahead and select it. And also make sure in edit and project settings, if you click on maps and modes where we just changed the map, here in the default game mode, let's change it to be the main menu, because again, we want the player to start in the main menu with the main menu game mode that we just created. And here, if you click on the selected game mode, you click down, just make sure that the player controller is PC main menu, which we changed inside of the game mode. Now everything is looking correct. So let's close it down. And now if you hit play, and instead of doing it here, now we are inside of the engine to test, because the only thing we did here when we played as a standalone game was to test if Steam was running, and it is running. So from this point, I'm just going to play in a new editor window instead. It opens a lot faster for me. So let's now close this down and let's begin creating the main UI. So go ahead inside of here, right click, make a new folder, and I'm going to call this one UI. And the first thing we want to do is design the main menu. I'm going to right click, go to user interface, widget blueprints, and let's select user widgets. Inside of here, let's call it WB main menu. So this is a widget is basically a menu in Unreal Engine. So inside of here, when we design widgets, we first start with a canvas. So let's search for canvas over here. Always start with a canvas, whatever you're doing. So go ahead and drop the canvas in, and here you have it. Now, just a tip to make your UI scale with all computers and mobile, click on the screen size up here, select laptop, and select generic 14 to 15.6-inch notebook. Now, what this is doing is you're actually designing this UI for a laptop size. And then over here in the DPI scale, if you click it down here, now you can change how much it is scaling on larger monitors. And usually what I do is I click on this one over here for the scale 8, and I usually find it to be 2.5, which is a nice size to scale in. So now I have a 4K monitor. It's actually going to scale over here for me. It's going to scale the UI 1.6 times from what you're designing here. It's really a nice method. You can design it for a laptop, small screen laptop, and it's also going to work for my 4K monitor as well. So very nice tip to have. Also pay attention to the zoom up here when you work, and zoom out and zoom in, because one is actually what it will look like inside of here. So let me just close the animations tab. I don't need it. And I'm also going to drag this bit to the side so we can see here. So the first thing we want to do is design the main menu. And here is this one from my other project. I like to show you what we are going to design so you can see here beforehand what we are doing. Again, we can design it a lot better visually, but you can take a look at my website again on gameinstruct.com. I have made a more in-depth course on how to add Steam multiplayer, including a lot more functionality than what is in this tutorial. So just make sure to check out the gameinstruct.com. It is a free course, so everyone can enroll in and take it. Okay, so this is what we're going to design. So I'm just going to hide this for now. And the first thing we want to do, since the buttons are on top of each other, we need a horizontal box or a vertical box. So if you search for a vertical box, we can click and drag it into the canvas panel. So here it is. If we click on it, I'm just going to resize it, drag it down. Let's change the anchor point to be in the middle because I want this UI to be in the middle. And let me make the alignment. So if you write 0, 0 here in the position right now, you can see it aligns to this corner. So you have to change the alignment here, and it is 0 0.5 to 0 0.5 in the Y. So X and Y 0 0.5. And here we have now this vertical box. So let's add some buttons to it. Now the buttons here for the UI, they have text and a button behind it. So we actually need something called an overlay because we are overlaying the text on the button. So let's drag the overlay and let's drag it to the vertical box. And inside of here, let's search for button. And inside of the overlay, we're going to drop the button, and we're also going to drop the text. So text and button inside of the overlay. Now for the button, I'm going to click here and make it fill horizontally and vertically as well. So it fills all the way. And also make sure, again, to check your zoom. If you're zoomed in like this and you think maybe this text is too large, this is because you're zoomed in +3. This is what it actually looks like. Okay, so clicking on the button or on the text, I can align the text in the middle of the button. And clicking on the button, I want to make it a bit larger. So clicking on style, normal, image size, and in the Y, I'm just going to make it a bit larger, maybe 65. And remember to also change it for the hovered state and pressed state. An easy way to do it is shift right click here, or you can simply just right click and hit copy, and then shift and left click on this one and on this one. So now we pasted the same size here as here and here. And for the text, I'm going to give it a shadow just so you can see it a bit better for this tutorial. So here in the shadow color, I'm going to increase the alpha to maybe 0.5. And I'm also going to give it an offset by 2 by 2 so you can see it a bit better here. Okay, so for this one, I'm going to hit Control D to duplicate and Control D again to duplicate this. And the first one I am going to call here in the text, let's say create server. And the second one, let's say search server. And the third one we can call quit. Okay, so for this one, what we can do is we can give it a bit of space here. But what we also can do is just click up here and hold control, click on the second overlay, the third overlay, and we can hit fill. So now it fills the whole space. Now let's give it a bit of space between each other, and we can do that for the padding here. So the top padding, we can give it, for example, 15, and the bottom padding, we can give it 15 as well, like this. And to make it smaller, click on the vertical box, and we can just make it as large as we want to here. If you want to visualize it without the dashed lines, you can always click up here, and let's click on the vertical box. I'm going to resize it like this. And actually, since we made it fill, this doesn't really matter. So if you click on the image size, it's actually not going to matter. So that is fine for now. Also, remember to select all the text. So click on the first one, hold Control, select on the second and the third, and now go down here, and in the visibility, you have to select not hit testable. What that means is you can now hit the button behind this text, because if the visibility is set to visible, this text is going to block the mouse cursor. And if you try to press the button on this text, it's going to block you and you're not able to press the button. So this is why we set the visibility to not hit testable, meaning that the mouse will not hit this text and it will still click this button even though you're clicking on the text. So now we are finished with this one. Everything is centered. Make sure that in the vertical box, you center the position of the X and Y to 0, 0. And now let us click on compile and save everything. And let's close this one down. Now let's go to the next menu. Let's right click, go to user interface, create a widget blueprint. And for this one, let's select here. This one, we're going to call it create server. So we're going to create the host menu. I like to show you what we're creating before we create it. So we are creating this one where we have the server name, and we can create the amount of slots for the server, and then we can hit create or go back to the main menu. Now, if you want a better design and a lot more functionality, for example, if you want to change game mode, change maps, change LAN mode, and a lot more, or for example, make the server private and public, you can always see my free course on gameinstruct.com. Again, it is free. You can always visit there and take a look alongside my other courses. But we're going to do this for now. So let's create all of this. And let's start by adding again a canvas panel, drag it in. And in here, let's start by adding a vertical box. Now this vertical box here, let's resize it, drag it into here. Also make sure again to click on screen size, laptops, and make sure we are designing it for the laptop here. Now for this one, again, change the anchor point to be in the middle, the alignment to be 0.5 by 0.5, and the position 0 to 0. Now it is aligned once again. So the first thing we need is a text, because we need it to say server name. And here, let's horizontally align it to the middle. And let's say server name. So now we have this. And now we need a text box we can write in. And this is the text box here. So let's click and drag this into the vertical box. And for this text box, let's change the foreground color. I don't know why the color is like this. So let's click on inherit. So you remove it. And let's make this one a dark color. So just black here. And you can hold shift and right click to copy, and hold shift and left click on those two to paste them in. And you can also just right click and copy and paste and so on. So now we have this, and I'm going to add a default value because I don't want the player to create an empty named server. So I'm just going to say my server as the default value. And let's give it some space over here. So clicking on the name, you can actually just go up here, search for spacer, and you can drag it in here between the text and the editable box. And clicking on the spacer, you can increase the Y value and choose how much you want to space it. So maybe 10, for example. So let's drag in another text and drag it into the vertical box. Let's again align it to the middle. And here we can call it amount of slots. And let's give it some space again. So I'm going to click on Control D for the spacer to duplicate it. You can also just right click and duplicate and go ahead and drag it beneath here. Now for the spacer, let's increase the Y so it spaces a lot more, maybe 50. And now let's go ahead and add the amount of slots. So this is a drop menu. So if you just search for combo, it's called a combo box in Unreal Engine. And it's the one called string. This means text. So let's drag this down here to the vertical box. And here we have it. So click on it. And now for the default options. So here we give it some options. Here are the options that the player can choose. So the player can choose to have a server with 2 slots, 4 slots, let's say 8 slots, and 16, for example. And the default selected option would be just 2 slots. And go ahead and hit compile. And here you see it is working. Again, I'm just going to duplicate the spacer and give it some space between those. And now it is working. Let's compile and save everything. Now we need a create server button and a back button. And I'm just going to go to my main menu here. And here we can just copy paste them. So I'm going to copy this overlay, the first one, for example, and going back, hitting the vertical box and clicking Control V to paste. And I'm going to, again, click on the vertical box, Control V to paste the second button. The first one, let's just call it create. And the second one, let's call it back. So now for these overlays, I'm just going to set the padding to 0. So they are full here. And I'm just going to add spacers once again. So duplicate the spacer, paste it down here, give it the amount of space you need. And now also between them. So duplicate this, add it down here, and just like this, whatever you like. Okay, so now this is finished. So for the vertical box, I'm just going to resize it so the buttons are like this. I'm actually going to give it a bit more space over here, something like 50. And again, resize the vertical box so the buttons become a bit larger, something like this. Everything's looking good. And you can also decide the width of it. And here we go. So for the vertical box, make sure again, the position is 0 by 0. And let us close this down. Now the almost last one is user interfaces. Let's go down and create the server browser. So creating the server browser. Go ahead and open it up. Now for the server browser, we are going to make it look like this one. So having a back button, a refresh button, and also having this info and the servers themselves inside of a scroll box. So now, again, when you design a menu, it's always nice to imagine what you want to design before you design it. And you can also write it on paper, what you want to design. So go ahead. Again, we need a canvas panel first. Searching for canvas panel. And let us add a vertical box. And inside of the vertical box, remember we have buttons horizontally aligned. So we have to search for a horizontal box. And inside of this horizontal box, remember it needs to be inside of the vertical box. So now let's drag this again into the middle, see what we're doing. The anchor point is aligned to the middle. The alignment is 0.5 to 0.5, and the position is 0, 0. So now it is in the middle. Now in the horizontal box, let me just copy the main menu buttons once again. I'm going to copy this overlay button, Control C, go here, click on the horizontal box, Control V, and I'm just going to Control V on the horizontal box again. Now for the first button, let's say over here, let's say back. And for the second button here, let's say refresh. And again, I'm going to select both of those overlays. And for the padding, I'm going to hit 0. And let's hit the first button. Let's change the Y size to something we like, maybe 65. And remember to hold Shift again and right click to copy and paste it into the hovered state and the pressed state as well. So doing that with the other button as well, setting it to 65 in the Y, holding Shift to copy, Shift right click, and then Shift left click on those two states as well. So now this is finished. Let's add a spacer between them here. And for this spacer, something like 25. And let me just make the vertical box a bit larger so I can see what I'm doing and center it again. So what we need here again is a horizontal box. Let's add it to the vertical box. Now what we're doing is we're adding this text up here. So let us do that. Let us click on the second vertical box, add some text, drag that in, and let me just copy it 3 times. So Control D to duplicate it here. The first text is going to say server name. Second text is going to say players. And the third one is going to say ping. And now adding a spacer between them. So searching for spacer, adding a spacer here. And let's add space in the X. Let's add, for example, 100. And let me click Control D to duplicate, paste it down here. And here we have it. Now for the horizontal box, I'm just going to align it to the middle, just so we have something simple. And again, I'm going to add a spacer between these two horizontal boxes so they have some space. Something like this. Again, you can click up here to remove the dashed lines so you can see what it looks like. Everything's looking great. Now down here we have the server list. And the server list is inside of a scroll box. So go ahead and drag that into the vertical box so it is down here. And now we need a vertical box because the servers are aligned vertically. So add a vertical box inside of the scroll box. And now what we can do now here for the vertical box, let's actually change the name because we need it later. I'm going to call it VB for vertical box and call it server list. And let us compile. Okay, so here we have the whole thing. Now we don't want to design these servers inside of here because they are not static UI elements. Every player is going to create their own server. So what we actually need to do instead of creating it inside of here, let's just save this, close this down. And the last UI, very, very simple. Let's create another widget blueprint and let's call this one server card. And it's actually the same thing. So imagine in another game, if you have a in-game shop or you sell items, the shop itself is the UI, the static UI that you create, and every single item is this card here. So every single item inside of the shop is actually a card by itself because they have custom information. So we are doing the same thing here. So for the server card, let's open it up. And again, let's add a canvas. Now, instead of just having a full screen canvas, let's click up here on the fill screen and let's select desired. So it's going to be here and it's only going to take the space of what we add here. So let's get started. Now, what we need for the server card, this is what we need to design here. So a button and some text on top of it. You can try to design it yourself if you want some practice. And let's get started. So here in the beginning, we need an overlay, and let's drag that in. For this overlay, I am going to anchor it to the middle, and again, alignment 0 0.5, 0 0.5, and position 0, 0. So now it is in the middle. So for this one, let's first add a button. Search for button, drag that into the overlay. And for the button, let's fill it horizontally and vertically. And let's now add some text on top of it. So if I search for text, add it on the overlay, and actually we need a horizontal box first. So let's search for a horizontal box, add it into the overlay, and now we can add the text inside of the horizontal box. Okay. Now for the overlay over here, you can see we can make it smaller and larger, but instead I'm actually going to say size to content. So it's going to size to whatever I add inside of here. Okay, so for the first one, the text block, this one is going to be the server name. It doesn't really matter what you write here because you're going to change it dynamically in the game. But I'm just going to call it server name, or you can even call it, for example, Jinx's server. or whatever. You can write wherever you want here. Okay, so give it a spacer and spacer. I'm going to add it to the horizontal box. Maybe the spacer is 100. And then duplicate the text. Now we need the amount of players. So for the amount of players, maybe 1 out of 4 total slots. And let's add a new spacer, duplicate this text down here. And now for the last one, I'm just going to say ping. Or not ping, we can just write something. We can write 99 ms, for example. Okay, so here we have it. And you can also give some space to the top and bottom. And you can do that by increasing this Y here, something like 50. And now for this overlay, this is, let's say the position is 0 here. And here for the horizontal box, let me fill it vertically as well and fill it horizontally. And now for this text, we can align it here in the middle. So align it vertically to the middle, this one as well, and this one as well. Now for the left and right, what you can do is you can give it some space as well. So this text, I'm just going to give it some padding to the left. So I'm just going to give it 15, maybe 20. And also for the MS, I'm going to give it 20 padding to the right. So it has some space. And now let's compile and save everything. And let's see what it looks like. So if I minimize this and I go to the server browser, and inside of here, I click on my server list vertical box and I search for WB server card. This is, remember, this is what I called it here. So you can also search for them up here and you can click and drag it into the server list. And here you see it. Okay, very awesome. Now you can also click Control D to duplicate it and see what it looks like. Remove the dashed lines. You can see we need some space between them. So if I go back to the server card, and what you can do here is this overlay, or actually this button here, you can click on the button and you can give it some padding to all sides, maybe 10. And now you can go back and now you see we have some spacing between them. Maybe a bit less, like 8 instead, compile, and here we have it. Okay, so these are the servers. Again, the design is not the best, but you can always visit my course if you're interested in making good designs as well and more functionalities. But this is very, very basic and everything's working. Now, let us see if the scroll box is working. So if I if I hit Control D to duplicate a lot, you can see the scroll box keeps going down and it's actually almost out of the screen. So to make the scroll box work, we have to click on Fill. And now you see when I click on Fill, it now works. Now I can scroll. If I click on the last one here, you can see it scrolls. And if you want to make it bigger, again, this is the vertical box. You can always make the vertical box larger or smaller, and you can also design it this way as well. If you want this to make it, if you want to make it this larger, again, you can make it more wide here. Okay, so everything's looking great. I'm going to make it something like this so it looks better. And for the vertical box, let us center it to 0, 0. Now for all of this, I'm going to delete all of these and just having the server list left. So go ahead and compile, save everything, close this down, and now you have created all of the UI. Now, before I forget, let me open up the server card and clicking on all of those here. So holding Control, click on all of the text. Remember down here, we have to change the visibility to not hit testable. I'm also going to give them a shadow so we can see them better. So 0.5 here in the shadow and with the offset of 2 by 2 so we can see them a bit better. So let's compile and save and close this down again. So now we are ready to code the main menu. So we need to code these buttons. So when you click on create server, it needs to take you to the server creation menu here. So let us do that. Let's open up the main menu. And in the graph where we code things, let's just delete all of this. And here we need the buttons. So the first button is create server. Click on the button and let's rename it up here to button create server and make sure it is variable so you can see it over here. Else you can't see it if it is not. And the second one, let's call it button search server. You can also call it server browser. And the third one, let's call it button quit. Okay, so for the first one, the button create server, let's click on the plus here for the unclicked. So what happens when you click on the button? And what needs to happen is it needs to open up this menu. Now, we haven't really created these UIs through code so far. So let us do that. And usually we create UI inside of the player controller. So let's go back to my content. Let's go to blueprints. Let's open up the player controller for the main menu. And here, let's go to the event graph. And now let's delete this one. Now in the event begin play, let's go ahead and add some code. So let's drag and say create widget. And now let's click here and search for the widget we want to create. Let's first create the main menu because we need that as well. So let's create the main menu. Let's right click and promote this to a variable. So we have it inside of a variable. And let's call this one main menu. Remember, we also need to add this to the viewport because right now inside the main menu, when you hit play, you can see you can't see anything. And this is because we haven't added this to the viewport. So if you drag from the variable and say add to viewport and you hit that one, so now you add it to the viewport. Now if you hit play, you can now see the main menu in the viewport. So when you click on this button, nothing happens as you can see because we haven't coded it yet. So let us do that. Let's drag from here and again say create widget. Go ahead and select that again. And for the next one, we want to create, if you go back to the UI, the server or create server one. So let's search for create server, choose that, promote this to a variable, call it create server. Now we don't really need to add it to the viewport because the main menu is in the viewport and this only needs to show when we press the button. So only doing this. Let me just copy this one, paste it in. And the next thing is the server browser, add it in, right click, promote it to a variable, call it WB server browser. And the last one is the server card, but we don't need to create it here because we're going to create it another place. So everything is looking great here. So now let us do the code inside of the main menu. Inside of here, when we create or when we press on the create server button, we want to display the create server UI here. So we need to communicate with the player controller. So what we need to do is right click and say get player controller because the code for this one here is inside of the player controller. So what you need to do here, get player controller and then say cast to PC because now we're saying we need to the code specifically to our custom player controller, which is called PC main menu. This is what casting is. So we're getting the default player controller, then we get the custom player controller we have. So cast to our own player controller. And from here, we can now access this variable we created called create server. If I drag from here and say I create server, I can see the variable. So get this variable. And now what we can do is add to viewports. So now we can add it to the viewport when we press the button. So pressing here, you're adding it to the viewport. But we also have to remember to remove the old one from the viewport. So what we can do is we can, before we add this to the viewport, if I hold Alt and click here to disconnect it, and let's remove the main menu first. So dragging here, taking the main menu one, and with this one, we can say remove from parents and select this one just like this and go ahead and connect this one now. So we're removing the main menu and we're adding the create server. So let's go ahead and try that. Clicking on, so now my mouse disappears and I have to enable it first. So going to the player controller, hitting the class defaults and hitting this one, show mouse cursor. Go ahead and compile, save everything. Let's play again. And now I can see my cursor all the time. Clicking on create server. Now it is working. Okay, everything is looking good. Now for the next one, it is the search server, which gives us the server browser. So clicking on the button, go down and hit the unclicked event to create another one. Or you can simply create it through here as well. You can see them here. We get the player controller. Let's just do this again. Remove the main menu. I'm just going to copy this code, remove the main menu, and we're going to add here the server browser. Selecting it here, add to viewport, and now that is working. So the last button is quit. Clicking on this one, going down, selecting on click. And for this one, very, very easy. Just search for quit and select this one, quit game. So now this is working. The server browser is working as well. And for the quit button, that one is working. This closes the game. So now the main menu is finished. Let's close it down. Let's go to the create server. Now for the back button, again, click on here and go to the graph. Now for the button, let's actually change the name first, call it button back. Go to the graph. Let's delete all of this. And let me just go back to the main menu so I can copy the code like this here. Just copy this part here. And for the button back, let's click on clicked, paste this again. And now let's get now we are in the create server. So let's get the create server and let's remove from parent to remove it from the viewports. Go ahead, connect it. And we need to add the main menu now because we're going back to the main menu. Search for the main menu. Go ahead and add to viewport. Select it. And now it's working. Okay, so what we need to do now is we also need to get the information for the server. So if a player writes something, we need to get it. So for the editable box, I usually just write input as a prefix and let's call it a server name. And for this one, the drop box here, let's call it a CB for combo box. And let's call this one amount of slots. And let's compile. Let's go over to the graph now. And now for the first one, for the server name, let's choose this one on text changed. So whatever the player writes inside of here, we need to store this as a variable. So I want to store it as a string variable because I need it as a string. So to do that, drag from here and say to string. And by the way, if you're not used to variables, text and string is almost the same. They are both text variables. So changing it to a string, and you can do a lot with a string. And I can show you in my in-depth course. For example, a string, you can modify it. If you just search for string, you can see all the things you can do with a string. You can trim the name. You can also replace things. So if they write bad words in the server name, you can actually replace it and you can chop the words and so on. But with a text, you can't really change it as you can with a string. So very, very cool. So here for this one, let's right click and promote this to a variable and call it server name. And now let us connect this. So whatever the player writes, it's going to store that inside of a variable. The same thing for the amount of slots. Let's click on the on selection changed. And here, the selected item, I'm going to say to int because I want it as a number, amount of slots to integer. And let's right click, promote this to a variable and call this amount of slots. Okay, let's connect this one like this. So now we have those working. Now for the last button, this one, let's click on it and call it button create. Now for this one, we need to host the server. And now we get into the Steam sessions. So usually when you create Steam sessions, you create it inside of something called a game instance. So if you open up the blueprints, right click here, make a new blueprint class. And inside of here, you can't see it here. So you have to go down here and you have to search for game instance. And here you find it. Now, the reason why we make it in a game instance is the game instance, you have one instance of this running all the time when you open up the game, and the game instance never shuts down. So even though you go into a server, you leave a server, you go to your shop and so on, the game instance is always running. So it's more safe to run the server hosting and so on the game instance. So I usually call it GI for game instance and call it the name of the game because there's only one game instance in a game. So Steam sessions, that's what I'm going to call it. And let's enter the game instance. And before we forget, let's also go to edit, project settings. Inside of here, let's go to maps and modes. And let's change the game instance default one to the one we just created. So GI Steam sessions. Now let's close it down and let's save everything and let's go back to the game instance. Now inside of here, let's make a custom event. Let's right click and search for custom event. And this one, I'm going to call it host session. This is what we're trying to do. So not sessions, but just session, host session. And what we want to use is if you right click and search for create advanced session. This is the Steam one. So if you hit it, it's a very long one, very confusing, maybe if you haven't seen it before, but it's super easy to use. So let us just go ahead and connect it. So we're trying to create this session here. Now for the extra settings, I want you to drag from here and say make array. So when you do make array, you simply break down this array so you can see what is inside of it. And here again, you can drag and say make. And I want to say make literal session property string. So this is because I want to give it a server name. So here in the key, let's say server name. In the host session, we're going to run it from the create server over here when the player. So if you click on the create button and you go down again, hit the unclicked. So when the player hits the create button, it runs this host session. So now it needs to take this information server name. The player has chosen the server name. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to drag this into the event and call it server name. And let me just compile and go back to the create server so you can see what it looks like. Now here, again, we are communicating with the Steam Sessions game instance. So what I can do here now, let's go down and say get game instance, and not this one. Again, get game instance, and it's this one for the game. And let's drag again and say cast to, because I need to use this one. Now, if you have taken my previous courses before, you know that casting is not always good to use all the time because it creates hard references. And hard references usually loads in Unreal Engine as the first thing when you open up a game. So sometimes you see a main menu that takes like 20 seconds to load before the game starts. And this is because one of the reasons is you use too many hard references casting. And again, you can take a look at my other courses where I use something called blueprint interfaces, a lot better to use. But for now, not to make it too advanced, let's do this. So casting to my game instance, I can now use everything inside of this, including this event. So if I just drag from here and say host session, so now I can use this, and here you can see I have the server name option. And this is because I added this variable to my event. So now I can set the server name from there. I also need to set the amount of players. So let's drag the public connections into here. Call this one amount of slots. And you can always make it cleaner like this. And you can double click on the line like here, double click. And for the player controller, just say get player controller and use it here. And the reason why we use the single player controller and not the multiplayer is because in the main menu, you are still in single player. So you are not in multiplayer when you are in the main menu, even though you are in a multiplayer game. The multiplayer part starts when you join the server. So here we host the session. Server name is just the variable we created before up here, and the amount of slots is over here as well. So let's drag this into here, and let's drag this one as well into here. So now we are hosting a session. And let me take a look if we forgot anything. So when you host a session, now on success, let's drag here and let's open level. So when we finish hosting our game, let's join the level. And for this one, I think it's the third person map. I'm not sure. So let's just take a look here. If I go to third person maps, yeah, I think it's the third person map. So let's use that one, third person map. And remember, you have to click on the arrow down here. And for the option, you have to write listen. So remember to do that. Go ahead and compile and save everything. So now we can try to test it out. If you hit play, and you can click on create server, you can choose whatever your name is here and amount of slots, and you can hit create. And now this should take you into the game and you are in multiplayer. Now we have to make the server browser as well before the other player can see it. Let's open up the server browser now, and let's open up the graph. And here, let's just remove all of this. Now, when we hit the back button, just like before, call it button back. And let's go back to actually, let's change the name as well for this one. And now button refresh. And let's go back to the graph. And inside of here for the back button, let's click it. And just like before, I'm going back to the main menu. I'm going to the graph, copying this code here, where we this code here. Let's paste it and let us connect it. And I'm going to drag here. And now we are in the server browser. So we need, when we click on back, we need to close the server browser. So if you search for server browser and remove from parent, now you need to add the main menu once again. So main menu, and you need to add to parent or add to viewport. So adding this to viewport, so now this works. The next thing is the refresh button. So hitting on clicked again. So when you click on the refresh button, now we need to use the node called, if you search for find sessions, and it's not this one. So it's not this one here, but it is, if you session. So it's this one from Steam called Find Sessions Advanced. Selecting it here, this one is from Steam, and let's go ahead and connect it. Now, before you do this, you have to remove the old servers, because you refresh it first time, you add a server, but when you refresh it the second time, you have to remove the old servers. So to do this, we have to use the server list as a variable. So clicking the server list, selecting is variable so you can see it in the graph. So here, let's take this variable, strike from here and say clear children. So we're going to clear all of the children, child components that is inside of here. Let's go ahead and connect it. For the player controller, I'm going to say get player controller. Go ahead and select it. And for the max results, amount of servers, I'm just going to write 999 and everything is good. Now on success, when we find a session, I want to loop through the sessions that I found and add them to the list. So let's drag from here and say for each loop, so like this one, for each loop, and for each what? For each session. So these are the sessions. So let's go ahead and connect them. So this is the result that we found. So now for each session, I want to create a widget, which is, remember, we created this server card. So I want to create a server card for each session I find, and I want to add this session to the server card. So we actually need to do something now in the server card. So let's open up the server card inside of the graph. Let's click on this variable and say found session. And let's search as a variable type, search for blueprint session result. Go ahead and select this, compile, and remember to hit instance editable expose on spawn. What that does is if you go back to the server browser now and you hit file, let's see here, file refresh all nodes, you will now see this one here because you pressed instance editable expose and spawn. So now you can connect this session you found and store it into a variable inside of here, because we need it later to join the server. When you press the button here, you need to join the server. So now we store it inside of here. So when we find sessions, for each of the session we find, we create a server card. And remember, we need to add this server card to the vertical box. You drag this vertical box and say add child, and then you connect it here, and the content is just this one. So now it is going to add all of the found sessions here. Okay, let's compile and save everything. Let's actually see if it works before we continue. So I need to run multiplayer. I need to click up here. Number of players is 2, and net mode is play as listen server. And so now it opens up 2. If I click up here, the second one is on my second monitor. So let me just minimize this one here and maximize this a bit. So the first one is going to create a server. It's going to be called hello. Now it's not going to display the correct name because we haven't done that yet. So let's do this and say create. Now on the second one, if I say search server and I click on refresh. I'm going to wait a bit because it takes some time sometimes to find servers. And once it finds a server, it should display it down here. And here you can see things to server. I can see the server here. I need to fix the UI because it's bugging. I haven't set the resize or the size for the pressed and hovered button state. But here you can see. Now we need to fix the server name to be displayed correctly, the players and the ping as well. So let's close this down and let us continue. Now for this error, it says that only local player controllers can be assigned to widgets. So let's go back to the player controller main menu. And here in the begin play, when we create all of these widgets, now you can do this by creating it through a client-sided event. However, for this example, I can just right click here and say, is a local player controller. Go ahead and select this one and just making sure it's a local player controller that creates all of those. Make a branch and go ahead and connect it. So if it is a local player controller, go ahead and create the UI for your own game here. And it's only bugging out because I'm running multiple instances of the game. It's not going to bug if you're running the game and I'm running the game. It's going to run just fine. But now the errors will be gone when you have added those here. So let's close all of this down and let's open up the server card. So now inside of here, we want to dynamically change these values. So the first one is the server name, and I'm going to hit here, call it text server name. It is variable, so I can see it over in the graph. And let's click on the second one, call it text amount of, we can just call it amount of players, and hit is variable. And the last one is called ping, and hit is variable. And the button behind all of it here, if you hit this button, we can call this button join server. So now we have it all here, and we're making sure that the visibility is not visible. It is non-hit testable for all of these text. And let's go back to the graph now. Let's delete all of this. Okay, so what we need to do here is we first need to get the server's name. And how do we do this? Remember, inside of the game instance, if I go back to blueprints, open up my game instance, here, remember, we made this one called extra settings. So this is what we're going to use. Let's make a new function first. So here in functions, click on the plus. Let's call this one get extra settings. We're going to get these settings here. Get extra settings. So inside of here, let's take this found session. Let's drag from here and say get extra settings. And now from these settings, we can say get session. And now you can get all of the values you create over here. Remember, it is not only a string that you can create, but you could have clicked on the plus and you could say make literal and choose, for example, a number, a float, and so on. But we only have the server name. So I'm going to go back to my server card, drag here and say get session property string. So it is a string, it is a server name. And you have to name it the same as what you called it over here in this key. I'm going to copy this, going back to the server card and pasting it here. I'm going to make a return node for my function, add return node, and drag this into here and call it the server name. So if I go back to the event graph, here I want to use the event construct event. And this is just the same as event begin play in all of the other blueprints. But in UI, it is called event construct. So whenever we create the server card, remember we did that. If I go back to the UI and I open up the server browser, whenever I click refresh, I create a server card for every session I find. So whenever I create a server card, it's going to run my event construct. And every time I see a session, I want to get the extra settings here that I got here. And here we can now set the text name or the server name. So if you click on this text, we already called it server name. So over here, server name, I'm going to drag it and say set text and go ahead and choose set text. And now we can just set it to this value here. Okay, so that text name is finished. So the next one is the amount of players. So let's take this text here and let's drag and say set text. Go ahead and select it. Now the amount of players, we have to use this found session again. So if you drag it out, we can say get current players. So how many is in the server, and get max players. How many can be in the server? Now, you can see here that these are two dynamic values. When you have two dynamic values inside of one text node here, what you can do is you can use something called format text. You can use this one. And now for this format text, how you write it is you write it as a curly bracket. And let's just call this one current players. And now you close the curly brackets. And now we need a slash because we have this here in the name. We have the slash here. And here after the slash, let's make curly brackets again. And let's call this one max amount of players. And let's remember to finish it with a curly bracket. So close it up. And now you see whenever you make curly brackets, you get new entry points and you can plug in the variables here, current players and the maximum amount of players. For the other one now is the MS, so the ping. Go ahead and click on it, drag this ping, set text just like before. Go ahead and set text. Now for the ping, let's use the found sessions again, copy and paste it here, and get ping in MS. Now again, I have to use format text because I need the number and the MS text behind it. So let's drag from here and say format text. And just like before, let me make a curly bracket, and this is the ping variable that's going to be in there. And I'm just going to write MS at the end because I need that text. And plug it in here, organize it like this. Okay, so now you have all of this done. The final thing we have to do is click on this button, Join Server, and click on Unclicked. So when you click on the Join Server, we need to use this one called Join Session. So search for Join Session. The player controller is just the Get Player Controller, so just the local player controller. Go ahead and select it. And now for the search results is just this the found session here. Go ahead and connect this, compile and save everything. I have to go back to create server because we actually need to have default values for these because these are never set if the player just hits create server and then creates here. They have never entered anything here. And if they don't do anything, these will be empty and your game will bug. So we actually have to do something in the event construct. So when you begin playing the game, let's just take this input server name here and let's say get text and go ahead and select get text. And let's take the server name here and hold Alt and drag to set it. Go ahead and do this. So whenever the player enters the menu, you have this my server. So if I go over, you have this my server stored inside of this variable. So let's do the same thing with the amount of slots. So drag this combo box and selected option, search for that, get selected options or option. And let's drag this amount of slots in here and set it as well. So now it is not going to bug. Also, if you want to refresh, so if you want to refresh the server browser right when you enter the first time, instead of pressing refresh the first time, you can do that as well. So let's go to the server browser and we have this one called button refresh, but you can also make a custom one and right click and say custom event, and you can call it refresh server. So you can actually run it like this as well. So let us do that. Let me right click event construct. So whenever we open up the server browser, we automatically refresh the server here, just like this. Okay. So let us compile now and let's click on play and let's test everything out. So if I create a server here, I call it, for example, haha 123. And the amount of slots is 16. Let me hit create. Now I am in the game. So now I'm waiting for my friend, and the friend is going to say search server. and it's going to automatically refresh. It's going to take a bit of time to find the server, but once it finds the server, it should have the correct name, which is haha123. One player is connected out of 16, and the MS is 37 ms. So now when I click on it, I should join the server, and I do. I can see the other player over there, and the other player can see me as well. So now we are connected in multiplayer, and Steam has connected. So now that everything is working, let's go ahead and package the project so you can send it to your friend. So here, clicking on platforms, go to Windows, and here you can package the content. So go ahead and package the project and select where you want to package it. I'm just going to package it to my desktop. So here I'm going to make a new folder called packages, and let's enter this folder and click select folder. Now it's good to show the log. So if you press show output log, I like to have it up. So instead of doing this, I'm going to click on window and output logs. So I have it up all the time like this. And I usually, what I look for is here you can see when it is finished. Sometimes it does take some time. So I'm actually going to pause this video and wait until this is finished. Right, so now you can see the package is complete and everything is finished. And if I go into the packages folder in my desktop, Windows, here you can see the Steam sessions, my game that I've created, and Steam is working inside of here. Now, to send it to your friend, go ahead and select everything, right click, and in WinRAR, if you don't have it, go ahead and download it, but simply add it to archive, make it into a zip folder, and I can just call it my game, for example. Go ahead and click OK. Now, this zip folder that you have created, go ahead and upload it to, for example, Google Drive or on a USB. Give it to your friend, and your friend can now open this up. You can open it up, and you can connect together. Again, just make sure that you have Steam running when you are doing this, because if you don't have Steam running, it's not going to work. That was it for now. This is how you connect Steam multiplayer. And again, make sure to check out my website, gameinstruct.com. I create a lot of courses, including a more in-depth on how you can implement more Steam features, such as adding LAN, adding multiple game modes, adding maps, and all of these cool features. A friend list, I'll probably add that as well in the future if I haven't done so already, the time you're watching this video. And thank you so much for watching. Remember to comment down below if you need any help, and hit like on this video, subscribe to support me and to view more of these courses. And I hope to see you in the next one.